What's up, everybody? Coach Mills here, coming at you with the top 10 list of all pro players in North America. We're going to be breaking down the best pro players in North America across many teams in the pro scene, and we're going to be also talking about their average combat score, the characters they play, their EDPI, and selective mouse that they're using in their pro matches, so that you know all this useful information, and you'll know also exactly who you should start watching to really get some crazy gameplay and learn a thing or two in the process. But speaking of learning, GameLeap.com is your one-stop shop to master any of the heroes that we're going to talk about in this video. You see, on the GameLeap website, we have in-depth VOD pro breakdowns, advanced tips, map and positioning guides, everything you need in order to climb the ranks of Valorant. So you do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below. But without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, before we get started, I need to make something clear. This is a list based on North American pro teams, okay? So if I see one single comment talking about freaking Mixwell or Scream or whoever, I'm gonna lose my mind. And if that's what you want, spam their names in the comments down below, because I literally will lose my actual mind. And on top of that, we're going to be using the average combat score as one metric that we're rating these players by. Now, that being said, just because someone has a high or low combat score doesn't make them bad or worse, but it does show us how much on average impact they're getting in the games. And of course, there's a lot of things that we have to take into account, but if someone has an astronomically low average combat score, you know that they are just underperforming compared to their peers. But enough of that, let's jump into the list. Now, kicking it off with number 10, we're talking about T1's Food with an average combat score of 231, who primarily plays Phoenix, Brimstone, and Raze. Now, Food is an insanely good player. I don't know if you've seen any of his highlights, but if you're looking for an underdog Phoenix player to cheer for, then Food might be your best bet. He's an insane player, he streams, and he's rocking the Logitech G703 mouse with an EDPI of 228. This is a very, very good player, and definitely keep an eye on him because I'm sure he's gonna do more great things in the future. Now, moving on to the number 9 spot, we're talking about Superman on Dignitas, and this is a new team, but remember that Superman was on the homeless team that played before. They beat T1, they did a lot of cool things before, and then they finally got picked up, added Shanks and all that stuff. Superman has an average combat score of 228, and he primarily plays Brimstone and Omen. Now, I couldn't find any information about what mouse he uses, but his EDPI is 227.2. Now, I'm also going to be talking about his performance in a lot of the matches before he was on Dignitas, because of course Dignitas has only played in one tournament. In fact, as I'm writing this script, they're still in the middle of a tournament. But on Homeless, specifically on Ascent, this guy consistently overperforms. He is a very, very good controller player. So if you are a controller player, you play Brimstone, you play Omen, you might find the perfect person to watch in Superman. I would highly suggest watching him, and he's just a great player to keep your eye on in the pro scene. Now, moving on to number 8, we need to talk about Dapper. This is the Sentinels player, our first Sentinels player of, spoiler alert, a lot of Sentinels players on this list. He has an average combat score of 216, which is the lowest one on the list, but I'm going to explain why that is. He's a Cypher player, and honestly, this guy has great, fantastic Cypher fundamentals. Now, yes, he doesn't have this astronomically high combat score, but compared to all the other Cyphers, Cypher is a role that gets far less combat score than many players in the entire game. So you got to keep that in mind, because a lot of times these Cyphers are lurking around. They're not at the forefront. They're guarding for flanks, even when people are baiting utility on attack. And of course, on defense, they're playing really passive, trying to stay alive as long as possible. But one thing that Dapper does a lot that I really like is he will ping a lot of people. So he will not tag people with the camera. He'll set it at a really high location and ping people as they cross by. And he's a really big rock to the Sentinels team, and he's definitely on our number 8 spot. And of course, his mouse is a Logitech G Pro wireless, and his EDPI is 240. So if you're looking for a Cypher to watch, I would highly suggest Dapper. And if I'm being a little biased here, honestly, he's a cool freaking guy. I've watched his stream a couple of times, so I would highly suggest this guy. Now, moving on to number 7 on our list, and this one might surprise you. This is the most underrated player on the entire list, in my personal opinion. Coming in at number 7 on Gen G is GMD, and GMD has an average combat score of 236. He's a Raze player mainly, and honestly, this guy might be one of the best Razes in the world. He is absolutely nuts, and I know that is a really bold claim to say when Gen G isn't dominating all these tournaments, but this guy is really putting in the work. Every single tournament you see him in, every single match you see him in, he is at the top of the leaderboards for his team. A lot of times he's in the top of the leaderboards for the entire match. This guy is crazy on Raze, and if you're trying to learn Raze, look no further than this guy because that's who he primarily plays. And this guy is absolutely nuts. And of course, he uses the Logitech G Pro wireless mouse with an eDPI of 304. Definitely don't sleep on this guy. In my opinion, he's the best player on Gen G, and he has tons of potential going into the future of the Valorant Pro scene. Now, moving on to number 6 on our list. Surprise, surprise, it's another Sentinels player. And Sick. Now, Sick has an average combat score of 223, and he's primarily a Sage and a Phoenix player. Now, that being said, in my opinion, his Phoenix has been slightly underwhelming compared to his peers, specifically, of course, Sinatra, but when you're comparing yourself to Sinatra, that is a pretty hard ball game to win, but his Sage is what is most impressive about Sick. If you've seen Sick Sage, he plays a very untraditional Sage, where he will use his abilities of playing in default, stalling the enemy in default on defense, or creating an opportunity, of course, and then he will go aggressive even on defense, using his heal as almost a form of sustain, where he will take an aggressive angle or an aggressive duel, he'll win that duel, and then he'll heal himself up. And also, this guy is a clutch god. He might be one of the best clutch gods on the list. A crazy awesome Sage player, and I would highly suggest watching this guy if you play Sage, or if you want to learn an untraditional strat, just see some pop-off moments. This guy is definitely one to keep your eye on. And of course, he uses the Logitech G Pro wireless, surprise, surprise, and his eDPI is the lowest on the entire list with a 188. Now we're entering top 5 list, baby, and our number 5 is Sentinels again, Shazam. And Shazam has an average combat score of 224. He's a Breach, a Sova, and a Jet player, but honestly, the reason that Shazam is just so good is he is dominating games at the same time as he's IGLing, or in-game leadering. So specifically this weekend, the weekend that just passed, Shazam has actually been dominating the tournament, and you gotta understand that typically if you're IGL, if you're calling strats, calling movement or plays of your team, it's gonna really affect you mechanically. This is true almost across the board. The IGL really suffers in game on his own actions, but of course, he is essential for the team to set up plays and things like that, but that doesn't seem to affect Shazam. This guy is actually just fragging all over the place and calling. He is one of the rocks for Sentinels, probably one of the biggest reasons for their success, and honestly, he's a really smart guy. Definitely go check out his stream, and he uses a Logitech G703 Hero with an eDPI of 212. Now, moving on to the next character on our list. This is the last character we're gonna hit up before we get to our special mentions or our notable mentions, and of course the top 3. This is TSM's Drone. Now, TSM's Drone has an average combat score of 242. He's a Phoenix, a Sova, and a Breach player, and if you haven't seen TSM's Drone play Phoenix, then you are absolutely missing out. This guy is consistent, reliable. He's one of the best lurker-style Phoenixes in the game. He will often lurk in your backline and get like a 3K out of nowhere. He is one of the best players on TSM, and he's one of the best players in the world, if I'm being honest. This guy is consistently overperforming, and of course, he has a Logitech G Pro wireless, which it seems like every freaking person has a G Pro wireless, so I guess if you want to be a god, you got to get a G Pro wireless. No sponsorship here, I'm just saying everyone has it. And then an eDPI 240 is what his eDPI is, but this guy is crazy. He streams. Go watch his stream. You want to learn how to be aggressive and carry, have aggressive impact in your games, definitely watch this guy. And of course, if you want to see a breakdown or a VOD review, let us know in the comments down below. Come on, we can jump on it, but we gotta know if you're interested, so just keep that in mind. Now, before we get to the top 3 players in all of North America, we gotta talk about honorable mentions, because there's some people that we're missing out. There's some people that barely didn't make the list, or we don't have enough information to put them on the list, and it's just not fair to them. So I have several players that I gotta mention before we get to the top 3. Now, the first player I gotta mention is Corey in FaZe, who basically, by all accounts, is absolutely nutty. He's dominating ladder. People that are playing against him in scrim say he's nutty. He's one of the best aimers. He is a very good player from all accounts. Like, like we said, but unfortunately, FaZe have not played in that many tournaments, and because of that, we don't really know how good this guy is, and we can't place him anywhere until he starts winning tournaments. So he's a very good player. He streams. Go check him out and decide for yourself, but for now, he's just getting an honorable mentions. Now, the next person we're going to put in honorable mentions is 100 Thieves Hiko, who is mainly a controller player on Omen and of course Brimstone. Now, that being said, Hiko is one of those players that we all know he's very good at the game. We watch his stream. He's one of the most popular Valorant players in the world right now, but his pro team not only didn't do very well, but got disbanded. Now, they recently picked up Nitro, and we know that they're probably going to pick up a lot more players and be a legitimate team, but we can't place Hiko on a top 10 list until he's winning games. Like, we just can't do it. So right now, we know this guy has potential to pop off. With Nitro on his roster, that's a veteran CS squad that could be really cool as a start to something great, but until then, he's just going to be an honorable mentions, and we can't put him on any list. Now, moving on to the next person we're going to talk about is Dicey from Immortals, who is a Jett player, and if you haven't seen this guy play Jett, you're missing out. This guy is one of the best players on Immortals. He is, in my opinion, the backbone of Immortals. He creates plays, he pops off. There was recently a clip of him getting a 5K up against Sentinels. This guy is a monster on Jett. Very consistent, a smart player, top tier mechanics. He's a great person, and honestly, I kind of wanted to put him on the list. He just barely missed out on the list, but maybe he should have been on the list. I'm not so sure. It really pained me not to put him on the list. Now, the last person we're going to talk about specifically is Calypso on Envy, who's an Omen and Breach player. One of the best players on Envy in my personal opinion. He's a great controller player, very, very consistent player, and I do think that based on his play alone, Envy has a lot of potential, and some of the other members on the Envy roster, if they step up their game a little bit, then I think that Envy can start winning maybe a few more games and start climbing up to the playoffs and things like that in these tournaments. Now, still before we get to the top 3, I gotta talk about all the players that are still honorable mentions that might deserve a spot, but got overshadowed by other players on their team. Think a player like Mitch, Zom, Subrosa, anyone else who is a great player, of course, but they don't necessarily stand out compared to their peers. Like, their peers are top tier. There's some players on their team that are just doing things so insanely well that it's hard to see just how good these players are. So these players probably deserve a spot, but I also didn't want to just fill the entire list with only like TSM and Sentinel players. Even though I put a lot of Sentinel players on this list, I kind of had to. That's like, in my opinion, the best team in NA right now. But of course, in your list, some of these players might make it. Remember, this is not a definitive list by any means, and it's going to be changing day by day. So of course, your own opinion and speculation is going to affect it. Now, the moment you've been waiting for, or the moment you skipped to, if you skipped, shame on you. Bonk, go smash that like and subscribe button for penalty. But Wardell is our number 3 spot of best player in NA. Now, TSM Wardell has an average combat score of 260, which is way higher than all the ones we've listed so far. He mains Jett and sometimes plays Sova, and he's known notoriously for abusing or using the operator. Now, Wardell also rocks the Logitech G Pro wireless with an EDPI of 261.2. Now, a lot of you know about Wardell. Pretty much everyone knows about Wardell who's been following the Valorant scene, and he is one of the pivotal roles in TSM. He's an op player. He basically hits these crazy shots, and now with him rocking the Jett almost in every game, he is taking these hyper aggressive angles and giving players no respect and almost never missing shots that he has to. This guy is dominant, and some teams just can't overcome Wardell at all. When Wardell really ramps up, some teams just fall victim to this guy, and of course, Wardell's entire team a lot of the time are built upon setting up Wardell, making it so Wardell can ramp to an op, protecting Wardell or setting up angles for Wardell. But of course, Wardell is the one that delivers on the setup. He gets set up by his team, but he delivers. And if you want to see an insane op player, also a guy, of course, that follows the Coach Mills motto of getting freaking hyped all the time, Wardell is your man. He's a great streamer. He's a great person to learn from. You want to learn how to op, you want to learn how to play Jett, definitely go watch Wardell, and you might learn a thing or two. Now, the next person that we got to talk about on the list, number 2 pro player in NA, is C9's Tens with an average combat score of 296. You heard me right. 296. This guy has the highest average combat score on the entire list and in the entire world, and it's not even close right now. Like, this guy is just dominating. He mains Jet, Raze, and recently he's actually whipped out the Reyna, and he's known for having nutty mechanics. This guy has top tier mechanics and takes duels he has no business winning, but wins them anyways. Whether it's a 1v3 op battle or simply flying to the enemy backline with his Jet ultimate, Tens is one of the ones that delivers, and he is primarily the reason why C9 is doing so well, or when they do well. Now, C9 isn't one of the top teams right now. I mean, they might be top 5, but they are not to the level of Sentinels and TSM. And this is probably the biggest reason why Tens is not at the #1 spot. Yes, he's playing phenomenally, but unless your team is dominating, you cannot call yourself the best player in the entire world, in my personal opinion. Now, Tens is doing a lot of work, but frankly, if he's doing so much work and still not winning, then I think that a lot of his teammates, or some of his teammates in particular, who I'm not going to call out, I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are, they are kind of lacking, honestly, and it's really holding Tens back. But maybe if he had a better, more rounded team, he wouldn't have as much average combat score because he wouldn't be carrying all the goddamn time. But I'm gonna get tilted just talking about it. Tens is a great player. You want to watch someone that's popping off. You want to watch one of the most mechanically gifted players in the entire game right now. Definitely watch Tens, who of course is rocking a Zowie S2 mouse, something new for a change, and an EDPI of 276. Now, you've probably already guessed it by now, but our #1 best person, not just in North America, but the entire world, is none other than Ninja. Now, you see, Ninja's... No, I'm just kidding, I'm sorry. Anyways, the best player on the list is Sinatra Sentinels. Now, Sinatra is on the Sentinels roster as the ace player of the team on the most dominant roster right now. The most recent tournament, I don't know the results from where I'm recording this right now, but it looks like it's going to be a clean sweep by Sinatra. He's dropping like 33 bombs in pro matches, getting average combat scores recently of even above 400. This guy is dominant, and his average combat score is only 240, which might seem low, but I'm going to explain why for Sinatra in particular that doesn't matter as much based on his playstyle and what this guy is accomplishing. Now, Sinatra mainly plays Sova, Phoenix, and Raze, and something notable about Sinatra is unless he picks one up, he will not op. Sinatra is not an opper like Tens, Wardell, or a lot of the higher up people on this list. Sinatra just doesn't do that, and he also always entries, and this is the important thing to understand about Sinatra's playstyle. As opposed to Wardell that will take these lurk flanks and try to slide in an opportunity to be surgical with his impact, and Wardell will be set up by his team, Sinatra is the entry that sets up his entire team. He goes in aggressively, he creates space, he creates opportunity, and he's whipping out all these crazy strategies, whether it's the Frenzy on pistol round or it's the LMG Sova. He is undoubtedly one of the most defining members on the Sentinel roster, which is right now the most dominant roster in North America. Sinatra is undoubtedly the best Sova right now in all of North America, and between him and Drone, I think he just edges it out as far as being the best Phoenix in the world. Sinatra is just popping off right now, top tier, and he is one of the best person you can watch to really, really get in the mindset of someone who is just God's gift to gaming. I mean, this guy doesn't even know why he does what he does. He said it himself. He just kind of acts on instinct. He can't explain to you why he does things, but he just consistently makes the right decisions and pops off. And of course, he's rocking a Logitech G Pro wireless and an EDPI of 384, which is our highest EDPI that we're going to talk about in this video. Now, that being said, do you agree with my list? Do you think that 10 should be on top? Wardell is the best? Do you think that Hiko is the best? I don't know. Who do you think is the best? Definitely share your list in the comments down below because I'm curious. But the GameLeap website is your one-stop shop to master any of the characters that we talked about in this video, including in-depth advanced breakdowns of tons of the pro players we listed. So do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below, and I can't wait to see you there. But that's all we got for you today. Thanks so much for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time,